The Court of Public Opinion is a part of the Amateur Radio Network. I have to share my personal story so that everyone gets a clear picture that no one deserves abuse. And if you need to talk about it, this is the time to do it. Get into the chat wing. We'll talk about it because I'm going to share my personal story with all of you who have lived through abuse or been around it or seen it or witnessed it, and why reporting abuse is essential for survival. Number one, I had one of the worst cases of neglect in Allegheny County in 1985, but it didn't start there. That's when the police finally got involved. Okay? I want to tell you, years of trapping people into situations. Number one, no one would want to live in the conditions I lived in. Okay? And along with my siblings. There were roaches coming out of the woodwork. There was roaches coming in and out of the ceilings. The conditions are so bad. We weren't taught basic, living skills either, by the way. I didn't receive medical attention until finally when the school got involved, which at that time was J&F Middle School. But there were situations that led up to that, and I'm going to explain. Is it really easy to blame one person? No. The circumstances, one. Number two, certain individuals that were involved. And I mean, it's really, really hard to put the blame, but the cycle abuse didn't just stop because the police got involved. This is not unusual. I've heard it. Some of you guys have heard it. But my situation in particular, now up to that point, a lot of things were pretty close to what as normal as possible. My dad was disabled. He had been a veteran. And he screamed, and he wanted his story to be out. How his signature was forged on our family property. But even after my dad died, it only got worse, not better. I promise you that. We were told, well, my uncle had passed away, that there was money aside for us. And my uncle even told that to all of us, that he would make sure that none of us would be left out. Well, that didn't change because my cousin, who is influential, pulled some strings or whatever. I don't know the whole story, honestly. But we never received a dime. I'm sorry. We received $800 each. Well, other people comfortably live in $200,000, $300,000 house, and there again. So it was a repeat pattern of psychological, mental, physical abuse. And when I say physical abuse, our needs were never met financially. We never had the proper home to live in. There was nothing proper about it. And there were people around us that knew about it. The worst part is they said, oh, that poor family. Oh, that poor family. And finally, when the police stepped in 1985 and we were put into foster care, it literally almost came to the point that my sisters were almost abducted, is how the police got involved. That's the only way. We barely survived. We barely survived that whole winter without heat, electricity. And I can tell you, anytime there's any form of neglect, please report it. I'm telling you, especially because of children. If you saw the conditions I was in, I mean, we went days without food. And it started all over again last year. And this time I'm an adult, and at least I have enough sense to know to say something. I'm not afraid to talk about it because I'm going to tell you that there were a lot of other circumstances that led to that severe neglect and abuse. The neglect of the home we lived in, and on. And it had everything to do with money. Sadly enough, what people would do for money, and I had to watch as my brothers and sisters grew up, how they learned to become part of the problem, defending the same people that caused the problems to start. And my dad pleaded with me, Jennifer, please say something. Please say something. Don't let them get away with this. And, I didn't really understand it because I was young at the time. All I remember is being, I would look at all these other kids and I was like, why is it that I'm living like this? When my family was politically influential in Pennsylvania. My grandfather was the attorney for the Pittsburgh police. Why wasn't somebody stepping in? And finally, when the police finally stepped in, they're like, they witnessed it. Fortunately, we knew the police had been to our home and wondering what's going on. And I don't know who reported what, But it turned out that our family property was stolen. There was a lot of financial rigging that went on behind our back. All we knew is that we were getting out of there and we were going to be placed in foster care. The reason I'm talking about it is it started all over again a year ago. I came back up here thinking I was going to help, giving money to individuals that needed it. And the whole sick abuse began over and over again. And this time I was threatened and I was shaking to my core. And I was shaking and I got out and I shoved as much stuff as I could in a cab and I was out. I ran for my life. And I'll keep running from the sick abusers. And the same people that went around telling people that they were abuse victims, telling everybody that they had survived abuse, were sitting there trying to rescue my mother. And she was threatening and cussing me out in front of the movers. And I screamed and I hollered and I asked my brother for help and I asked for gas money or groceries, anything to survive it. All the while, after I left an abusive marriage. Now, there was no logical reason for me to move into my mother's home and help her. No logical reason other than to want to help her. I had enough money to start over. I had to sell my vehicle. I had to sell literally anything of any value to get back to Pennsylvania, thinking in my mind, I'm coming back here to help my nephew or my family who's paralyzed, which was already an awkward situation. I'm not here to make a bad situation worse, is what I'm saying. When we packed my truck out, I spent out $1,600 on a U-Haul. And I didn't really want to do that. I was, again, talked into that. Again and again, talked into things. I was not comfortable with packing up a U-Haul after I had just put all my items into storage. And, the biggest ripoff is that I know the same people have been protecting and defending this bad behavior on and on. I'd like to know why. Because I sat here for the last, 48 hours wondering how am I going to make ends meet. It's been an ongoing problem because it's not just one or two individuals. It's the circumstances, one. And then there were the players behind it and on and on and on. I have to share this because had it literally not come to the point that somebody almost died, I couldn't just sit back and be silenced. You can take normal people and put them through an abusive situation and then shove them into a mental institution. It doesn't make sense how the abuse of the mental health system here in this region, you can't abuse somebody and then turn around and tell them, I wish they would have a better life. That is sick behavior. And for me not to say something, to abuse the mental health system, okay? Everything from stealing on, and then turn around and say, I wish they would have a better life. The only way we're going to have a better life is we call this out and start over. I won my case last year, and I did not I didn't ask for this. I came up here thinking, my thinking got me right where I'm at. I knew that if I didn't come up here, I didn't know what was going to happen. I was concerned for my sister because her son was paralyzed. I drove up from my mother's home up to my foster dad, and I saw something in his eyes, and I knew this is no good. It's never good for me to go back to that home. Never. It's never a good idea. I don't know what it was. There was just some sense in me that said, I don't want near this place. I even asked my foster dad if he would be willing to open up his home to my nephew. A couple weeks later, they moved him in. And you think he thought the idea up himself. I don't want to be pointing fingers at other people. But I'm going to tell you, at 15 years old or at 9 years old, I can't be responsible for the adults around me. I can't enable bad behavior. So I mentioned it to my brother over the weekend. He goes, well, why didn't you say anything? I said, we've been saying stuff about this all along. We didn't tell you the specifics because I don't need to tell you all the details. So I don't know if I can trust them. I mean, this is personal, very difficult to open up to people that haven't really had my back. In fact, I can tell you for a fact, they're out vacationing, going out and doing things, and we got a crisis after crisis. It's the same form of escape. Nobody wants to deal with the problems. They said, well, move on, move on, move on, move on. You're part of the reason we're having trouble moving on. So I walk away from all this. I go to college, and it starts all over again. I aged out of foster care. I barely survived that too. And it's a lot easier to shove somebody in a mental hospital and call them mentally ill. That was my life story. Even after I signed up and served in the military. The psychological abuse that went on, and the mental abuse that went on, using the system to mentally abuse somebody. It's such a hoax to live this way. You know, we mentioned it to somebody and they just passively ignored it. And they wonder why we're going public with this. We've told them over and over again, I'm not going to endure this. I'm going to say personally to anyone that was associated with this, I am so sorry that you're finally getting caught. You should have been found out about it a long time ago. When Allegheny County courts got involved, when the court system got involved, they didn't get involved because this was a fun and games. This is a life and death. Had it not been for the schools and the programs that I've recently talked to, thank God that they stepped in. Thank God. Because I don't know how much more we could survive this way. Mental abuse, using mental health records and twisting the words around. That is not how it's done. But apparently they did enough. I looked up the information of the two individuals that were involved in fraudulently writing a psychological evaluation on me. They paid $50. My brother paid $50 to my ex-husband to fraudulently report that I was mentally incapable of doing some. Luckily, the public defender and the legal system had my back again. My case was called false imprisonment. I was being abused, and then they would turn around and say it was my fault, and then I needed help. This was how the psychological sick abuse. And it went back years, long before I was ever born. I really, truly cannot believe that this went on as long as it did. I mean, everything from taking me to the side of the road and asking me to have sex. I mean, on and on. And it wasn't just, like I said, the circumstances. It was a lot easier to take me into a dark alley at 25 and ask me to have sex. And I was told I was the crazy one. I was told a lot of things in this that, maybe it's your fault. Well, what did you do wrong? This is what my brother said to me. What did you do wrong? I'm like, you know what? This is why I don't ask any of you. Don't ever go to these people. If this is the kind of craziness that you have to endure just because you're outspoken, no normal person could have survived years of abuse. Watch this every day and looking at my health and how it was deteriorating over and over again and not say something. No normal person would want to live this way. And then be shoved into mental hospitals when they're fraudulently reporting it. And I lost my any career options, any good jobs that I had were always somehow sabotaged. I ended up paralyzed, and the worst part of it is that I went through some kind of medical stuff, when you are diagnosed with meningitis. Still, nobody there to check on me. No one asked me. I went through it again and again. Not one person really, really looked out for me. They always have somebody else that needed to be paying attention to. There's always something else going on. And anytime I asked for help, they were like, well, they would just stumble over their words. I'm angry. And I'm angry because you know what? No one should have to be without a refrigerator and stuff. I had called a friend from Illinois. And you know what? He's in here almost crippled by his own physical disabilities. And he's giving me this last $20 just so that I can get groceries. I had to share this because it still is going on. Because if it hadn't been for the police reports, if it hadn't been for legally winning my cases, if it hadn't been for me being smart enough to be outspoken and saying something that this would not continue, I don't know who I might save in the process. I'm telling them that they keep going around these certain individuals, and they told me this in 1987. If I go back home, the chances of me surviving are slimmer than none. And they were right. Once they got access to me again, once I aged out of foster care, everything changed. My foster dad's behavior changed, and everyone around me, because we were the only ones that were smart enough to say something. We're going to call them out. I'm going to tell you, when we went to this first foster home, and I walked in on it and found my sister taped, literally cornered in a corner for four hours. I don't know how she survived those 4 hours. If I hadn't come home on the activity bus at Seneca Valley that day, the fact that I finally said something publicly is one thing, but I did not stop. I was so angered and outraged that this woman became a foster parent. It turned out that she ended up, I don't know, I think she ended up going to trial, and she was found guilty for abusing children in Illinois, and it became one of the most explosive cases. In fact, Oprah Winfrey interviewed her. I didn't know why she was interviewed by Oprah Winfrey in 1986 or 87 at the time, but it turned out she was a part of this big scandal or something like that. But she was interviewed by Oprah Winfrey. I cannot believe I survived this, over 30 years of it. And this went on. I mean, everyone that knew anything about our home and our neighborhood, and I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable about this. No one can honestly have known unless you walked in or witnessed it yourself. But the people that witnessed it, the people that saw what was going on, the problem is that it was the same person that was robbing my mother at the same time. So it turns out my uncle, who I don't particularly want nothing to do with him, honestly. I feel sorry for him. That's a sad situation in itself. And the reason I say this is because my grandfather was a prominent attorney in Allegheny County. This could happen to my family, and this could happen to somebody else. The only reason that it's different is because I am not going to sit there and shut up and not say something. Mental abuse and psychological abuse and starving a family, it could happen to a lot of families, and it seems to happen with richer families for some reason. I can't explain it. But the difference here is that we did not stay in it, thank God. And we're not going to stay in it again. And I'm not going to associate with these people. And I don't have to. Because today I have a voice. And I don't have to succumb to abuse. I don't have to succumb. I'm smarter and wiser. But I'm going to tell you, put anyone in a weak position when they're handicapped or paralyzed, you cannot fight off abusers. And everyone that recruited them, and anyone that recruited any of them. I sat and witnessed how foster families treated me. And I got snarls and bad looks from another foster family. And it didn't matter at this point because I knew why we were in foster care. I knew I didn't have to listen to any of these foster parents with their cruel, unusual actions and words. They were always okay with the other kids. It was the ones that were outspoken that didn't stand around waiting for it to happen. We're sitting there trying to be as friendly as possible. And I sat there and watched my brother's foster dad snarl at us. Learned that he was hitting my brother. But no one ever wanted to say anything about that because it was my fault. And none of us. And I think to myself, you know why we've lost faith in people? Because people were sitting there giving them awards and letters, and they were getting praise while I'm sitting there thinking, how does this person get praise when I know that man is abusing my brother? And how I am not comfortable watching these people get, a pat on the back. Because a lot of people, they're in denial. They can't live with the truth. It's very hard, but the denial part is worse. Watching somebody in denial, watching my brother live in denial was the worst experience of my life. Because he's like, no, they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do that. This is how it is, living in denial. And the only reason that they haven't waken up, because that is a coping mechanism. And there are people that will cope with abuse. They'll live with it. They'll try to think up, why is this happening? There's no logical reason for abuse. I'm going to tell you right now. And the reason I'm outspoken, because if I'm outspoken on Facebook and I'm outspoken here about mental, psychological abuse, if it was up to them, everyone would be locked up in a psych ward. That is what you're seeing on the catwalk today. They want this. And I'm here to tell you guys, this is a way of life. It's psychological abuse of the epic proportion. And if I didn't say anything, that my grandmother died due to electric shock therapy in 1982, they shocked her they gave her a lobotomy. You could have told me that, oh yeah, she was crazy, this, but I'm going to tell you, when you look at the real story behind Operation Paperclip, my grandmother was a subject of that. And now they want to reintroduce electric shock therapy. I'm going to tell you, if I don't say something, if you guys don't talk about mental abuse and you don't listen, you look at Katy Perry, how they applaud her, that sick egomaniac, people like her. She's sitting there, they entertain this. This is the entertainment business. And I've been around it. I've been around Hollywood entertainment business, and I'm telling you firsthand, yes, they rape people. I reported one case in April 18th, 1999. They would not take our case. The Allegheny County DA. This is a way of life. They introduce them and then foster care and the fraud and the lying and the cheating. And all it is to just cover up one crime after another or one abuse after another. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go look at some of the articles that were just recently posted, how the New York catwalk now is now favorable to straitjackets as fashion wear. And they're introducing this, and they can call you crazy and they can call you names, but this is a reality. I watched my grandmother die in 1982 due to so much electric shock therapy. If I don't say anything, and if I don't reach out to some of you guys, and I'm the granddaughter of the Pittsburgh police, don't think that this is the norm. My grandfather had a reputation for being one of the most wonderful people. And my mother told me this on and on. I was trying to think of, why would my mother go along with this? Why would she be okay with her mother that was left in an institution to literally die over a lobotomy? They gave my grandmother a lobotomy. And they said, well, this is normal because, and they were shaking. And they're all on Prozac. If I don't say something to some of you guys that this can happen to my family, you know what? The only reason I didn't sit here and not say anything, because I do care. I do care about them, believe it or not. I'm not trying to make them an example. I'm trying to tell you, this is the conditioning. I've lived it. If I don't say anything, they could starve your family out. They could put you in situations. I lived it. Many of my neighbors and kids I went to high school and grade school all knew it. It was not a secret. I was talking to a friend of mine, Tom, last year. He says, I can't believe you survived this. Actually, it's happening right in front of you. All you have to do is turn on the TV. I couldn't stand to watch Katy Perry get, patted on the back for putting an eye in her mouth, which is all demonic. That's what they're into. If we don't talk about what they're doing on the fashion runway, I'm afraid that it might be too late. When I say that they're introducing electric shock therapy back in as a normal treatment, and they're going to try to tell everyone out there that this is okay. My grandmother died, and I have the hospital records to back it up. I have all the records to back up years of abuse. I'm going to use my case as an example, because if I don't say something, if I don't reach out to the public, if I don't say something, you guys, this is what they want. They would rather put all these people on psychotropic drugs and tell you have the problem, and use mental abuse and confusion. And this is the psychological trap. Yes, you got to take the red pill for this one. My family alone, the influence and status meant nothing. My grandmother died this way. So anyone out there that uses a DSM to control and manipulate and make up these diagnoses, they trapped most of the people into this. this matrix. I don't know how to the extent. I just know this. It's a trap because no one could survive years of abuse. No one could survive years of mental abuse and how they would fraudulently write their name on it. Luckily, we won our case, and that was on a technicality on the offender's part. We won my case, and we're going to keep winning my case. And I've already, thank God, I got the ear of representatives about the mental health abuse, the institutionalizing of children into foster care and abusing them, and then shove them into a psych ward. You cannot be this sick. You cannot be this sick and abuse children and then put them on psychotropic drugs and tell the world that it's always somebody else's problem. That is the sickness. It seems like if they don't manipulate the system, or manipulate the people in it, or manipulate you with sick ads and telling us this is okay, it's all it's all done under the radar. It's all subliminal. They're not going to come out and just be honest. You know that. That would mean them losing millions and billions of dollars, $1 trillion in industry as they're bringing in more drugs. And I'm telling you, some of you guys, if you want to blame one person over another, it's hard to do. Because to me, I'm using one example and looking at the broader view of this because it's happening around you everywhere. When I saw Katy Perry sat there laughingly joke about her album cover, and she's a pretty girl. So maybe she's got the attention of other people. Maybe she's influential because she wrote a bunch of music. Remember, she wanted to be like Amy Grant? She is the most egotistical, prideful woman next to Madonna and many of these people that promote this. All the mental abuse, all the years of mental abuse, and everything that I have witnessed personally, and some of you have witnessed, and all of you, the only reason we're outspoken is because we will not live this way. I'm not going to wait for the day that they start shuffling people into a mental health ward. Because they've already been doing it. They've been doing it, and they're stealing from disabled people. And we had a case that with the... I had one case, actually, I reported it, but our report was too late. They said they're not allowed to go into disabled individuals' account and take money out. I said, well, they did. And these mental health agencies, all big freaking sick cover. You know what I think about the mental health agencies and the programs? If they don't say something, if you guys don't say something, the way this is going, if they have their way, the psychological abuse I'm watching and we're witnessing. I see how they trap people in things like this. You twist people's words around anything. And I can't entertain abuse. I can't. Not without saying something to the world or the people around me. I can't entertain it. I can't watch every day that someone or a family is starving and they use the mental health system and institutions to do it. Because I watched my grandma at 12 years old get a lobotomy, and it's always somebody else, and they say mental health is a genetic problem. That is a lie. If you give these people psychotropic drugs, any one of these people, if you take any of these people off, this is dangerous. And psychiatry always was looked at as junk science. There's a reason. If they can convince us that taking somebody off mental health psychotropic drugs doesn't have horrible side effects, then explain all the school shootings. Because every one of those children or any one of these kids who were on psychotropic drugs were somehow coming off their drugs, and they all ended up killing people and suicidal. I recommend you better get to the right doctors and right people if you're having problems. Change doctors if you have to. But don't sit there and be a victim of mental health abuse and the institutionalization that is happening to your kids, because you're not going to recognize your kids anymore. I'm going to tell you, a lot of these parents won't even say anything. They think they'll go along with this because they, in their own rational mind, they know it's wrong, but they normalize it. It's like, well, I guess everybody else is going along with it. No, actually, there are more people like me. I'm just adding a voice to it. There's Alex Jones. There's plenty of people that are talking about mental health abuse and how they literally are walking people in with fluoride, putting fluoride, trace minerals of fluoride into water. The very substances that led to the concentration camps, that literally led to the Holocaust of the Jewish people. They put fluoride in the water. They put fluoride in your toothpaste. Pay attention. Please pay attention to what's going on. I wouldn't just speak about all the things that have happened to me personally. I know all of you, to some degree or another, have witnessed it or lived through it or didn't have the voice to speak to it. But if we don't speak to this, if we don't say something, okay? If we don't watch what they're doing to Donald Trump and everyone else out there that is trying to do the right thing, we are going to live through this. Mental abuse. Some people say, well, in military training, that's part of military training. I'm going to tell you right now, there's not enough training, not enough family events I would want to go to. If I watch or witness somebody being abused, I'm sorry. I have to say what I need to say. I'm not going to watch somebody drag some of these people into a mental health ward and give them a lobotomy. I watched my grandmother died over this. She was cramped up. She was in a fetal position. Her arms were twisted in. I could not believe this. I looked around and I was like, you know, everything seemed very normal. My grandmother was a Jewish woman, by the way. And as far as I know, I don't want to be pinning on anybody, but losing your house and your property and everything, listen, I would rather have lost everything I own, knowing that we could maybe save somebody's life. And that's exactly what ended up happening. Why they go back and hang out with them, I'm not quite sure I can answer all those questions. I can say this. Every time we speak out against mental health abuse and the abuse of the mental health system, we're one step closer to living and surviving. But I'm going to tell you, I'm not on the same side of these people. I'm not comfortable with what I saw my grandmother and what they have used and abused the institutions to do. And it's happening in your school system. It happens. And I talked to somebody I knew from high school and said, well, what about all the mental health abuses? I go, if you gave me the benefit of the doubt, the same benefit of the doubt that a lot of people have given them, you would want to hear my story. I hope my story reaches some of you, because I'm going to tell you, when I saw what is happening, if I didn't say anything, if my grandmother didn't die this way, or if I didn't watch how they abuse the courts, I don't know. Has nothing to do with influence and power, I guess. There are people that are influential and powerful behind that, though. That's why you need to speak out as an individual. If you've been an abuse survivor, if you survived mental health abuse, you must report it. Please contact me, because we are addressing the Pennsylvania state representatives. We are addressing this. We're going to address it on the federal level as well. Finally, our story's getting heard. And luckily, my paperwork is on the president's desk. Thank God. Because I could not sit here and tell you guys that I could discuss this with much less the president or anyone around me if I finally didn't get heard. Mental health abuse is real. We're going to discuss it. We're going to talk about it. And we're going to keep talking about it. The only way we defend ourselves and we defend our president is talk about the abuse of the mental health system. False reporting, false imprisonment, on and on. Caging up people. It's no different than human trafficking. It's the same form of abuse. Please, please make sure that you get our message out and keep talking about the human trafficking issue, the mental health abuse system. They cannot win as long as we band together as a nation and protecting our president. As for me, when I looked at how they use this system to abuse people, I realized and I recognized finally the state representatives and states across the nation are starting to recognize mental health abuse. And now our president, thank God,